Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Welcome to another unscripted rant. This week's topic may be a little controversial, so if we have a few viewers who are easily offended or closed-minded or willing to attack instead of reasoning and seeing another side to the story, or an idea that perhaps what they are seeing is not 100% what they should be believing, if there are people who cannot handle the idea that perhaps what they have known for a long time could perhaps be off and that they should consider a new ideal or a new perspective, if there are people who cannot handle that, perhaps close off the video and find something else to watch if you are not able to handle this responsibly and maturely. And let's begin. So, it is 2020, and this year, for some reason, has been insanely wild, but that is not what we are here for. Today's topic is relying more on something very highly noted in this day and age, and it seems that now would be a good time to discuss it so that some people are not wildly confused as to what is being meant, so that people can sort of see everyone's side to things and what is coming from where and what certain people mean. Let's see. Let's jump right into it. The topic today is on racism. And while yes, many believe certain things, this is a very intense topic, especially when handled by those others know would have more privilege. You would believe they have no idea what they're talking about. Have personally done much research on this, have personally seen posts and even reblogged some stuff and looked into people's views on this, have consulted many people, and rather than giving a personal opinion, would like to sort of see from their sides and what others may possibly think of this on their own terms. Now, what is racism? Some may possibly be questioning at this time. Well, many have different ways of looking at it. Some believe it is systematic and that racism is founded on those who mess up others' lives by inherently pressing them to be less than human based off of their looks, their cultures, where they came from, assuming things about them, or pushing widely just joked about stereotypes as if they are true. Putting them into a mockery, or at least even putting them to death by an unfair system. Others believe it is simply stereotypes themselves. What are stereotypes? Stereotypes are jokes in the media or things that were widely formed. They are like historical inside jokes, like how people believe that Ireland really, really, really likes potatoes. And some people enjoy stereotypes, some embrace them, some don't mean them and are able to understand that stereotypes are widely taken as a joke and instead build off of the idea that they can make prompts or comics or just generally poke fun at themselves with it without harming anyone, which seems fine and harmless until people take these stereotypes out of proportion and use them genuinely. Now, what makes a stereotype harmful is when it is, one, insulting and has no background to it. Like if people were to say, all people from Scotland are disgusting, dirty, vile sheep humpers. Now that wouldn't be nice. That would just be a very jerk move of a stereotype to create. No one should have to think for a second that they would have the right to induce hate speech into a stereotype they were creating. That would just be them having a personal offense against them. Let's look at the stereotype of Canadians liking maple syrup. Now, it doesn't seem to be an insult, right? It seems more like people would just be like, oh, you like maple syrup. And many find that it's just a joke. Many find, oh, Canadians apologize a lot and all that and are really nice. And despite possibly being inaccurate, many don't take this to harm because it's not really offensive. Like, people realize that, oh, these are jokes. Oh, they're not holding anything against us. Oh, even if some people use it often or have widely allowed this to go about the media, they wouldn't be like, oh, heck, you guys are so dumb, you guys are so racist for saying we like maple syrup, we like beavers and we're wild animals. Well, no, it's more people just laugh about it and move on. Some might not be easily alright with this humor, but others are, and it depends who can handle what without letting their anger get ahead of them before their reasoning. But again, what makes these stereotypes racist in the end is when people believe them falsely and pressurize this onto others and use these stereotypes to put others out of jobs or to get others to believe them. For example, like Cartman from South Park, he would take a character or like he would take a stereotype and he would say it as if it was true. Like, he had a friend, Kyle, who was a Jew, and he would be like, oh, these Jewish stereotypes are true, that's why you can't do this, and everyone thought he was racist because he took it seriously. He actually used it to pressurize against those around him until they were affected. That's what makes it harmful, not joking about it and letting it go, as long as the other person is okay with being joked about. If the other person is not okay with the joke, no matter what it is, perhaps it would be better to drop it. But if they are not being directly told it until it pisses them off, or it's just being told to others who can laugh at it, or it's journalized in the media, they may look away from it and realize that it is not to offend them personally, and some are just using it to the general public, and others may find this appealing or just generally funny without thinking it is factual. Now, another part of racism people find is things such as discrimination, taking people by... Well, before we get into that, actually, pause. Many may need to know what discrimination is, or maybe you are educated well, but it depends who's on this video. Discrimination is where you take anyone by a quality, like, let's say they have blonde hair, or brown eyes, or freckles, and you decide they cannot hang out with you because they have this feature, or it makes them inferior to you. And you would think, oh, this must truly be racism. But here's the thing. That's what makes racism very messy at times. Do we truly have a bottom line meaning for it? Many believe, oh, this is racism, but the truth is we have become so uncivilized as far as we are to be concerned currently that some of us do not use the word enough, or some of us abuse the word completely. It's like how you would see a discourse on Twitter and were to decide this person did not agree with me, I now had the full pledge to call them a Nazi when they don't even know how Nazis work. And some still don't, and it's very sad that we are not properly educating on these systematic values of life so that people can get a proper definition of them. Now, moving on to a more important viewing on this. Where do people draw the line with racism? Knowing how some call it racist and then some call those who call it racist simply offended or irrational over it. Do we truly know what we are talking about when we use these words? Well, here's the thing. It seems many mix up stereotypes and jokes and harmless fun and actively being against other races. The bottom line, when coming from a medium or mode or mean or whatever amount of people, the most percentages would say racism is discriminating against color of skin and trying to get them systematically removed for the sake of supremacy, or generally believing that they are less than human, or treating them like they are evil because they do not understand them. It seems more as though racism is the intensity of putting them to absolute death, treating them as though they are inferior, and adding along to the bounds of supremacy, which in itself is never an okay thing to be doing. You should never support such acts. And yeah, you should never be hurting people by race. It's not about race, it's not about ethnicity. People, when they are born, they do not choose their looks, they do not choose where they come from. We should not judge them by this. Many even say that we should not, racism is by judging people only simply off of the characteristics of their skin color and saying it is what makes them less human as a whole. And we know this is inherently wrong. So if that is what makes it so, why do we believe that stereotypes and jokes are also a main plot to this? Unless we are simply taking everything we do not agree with or find slightly questionable, and instead of asking for the intent behind it or taking it into our own accord to research for a few days to come up with a proper meaning over it, we reschedule the idea that is simply racism, and we do not go further into it than that. We truly decide instead that because it hurt our feelings and because we do not agree with it or we do not understand it or because it made someone feel uncomfortable or it made them feel represented wrongly, they believe that it is then automatically racism in some shape, form, or way. But then again, if this person has simply made perhaps a stereotypical joke and did not mean anything against you or did not find you inferior or did not find you a terrible person, if they have drawn a character perhaps in a way that is stereotyped and did not mean it seriously and did not think all races actually did this, if they did not have the intention of doing it and are not genuinely doing it to piss anyone off and are not doing it in a form or way where they believe it to be factual, if they have not shown to be actively discriminating against races, if they have not shown to ever judge anyone by their skin color, if they have never shown to try to convince others that this is the true cultures and other cultures are wrong, if they have not truly caused a disturbance by race or formed the heresy or idea that their race is superior, are they truly racist? Or are you just simply taking the idea on what you believe and are deciding that I think I am right because, I strongly feel this and others need to know about it? well, how much do you really know about it when you are looking into it from the surface? Others are also aware that, many believe racism has systematic history. So if we look into history, we can see that for many years, people of color, as many call them, people who have been put under the system because others believe they are people of color that are less human than us, they put them through things, or at least have put them through situations that are unjust and inhumane, and have left them there to die. And that is not okay, and that has been happening for years. And yes, we must fight for these people so that we may have equal rights, but then another concept seems to have dumbfounded, if we are to be honest. A new terminology that has apparently been rising through the media called reverse racism. Now, how does reverse racism operate in itself? How does reverse racism qualify? What do they consider that? Now, was looking through Instagram, and there were people saying that, oh, when accused of racism, white people or whatever, people who of privilege, people who are above the system, which many have referred to as white people, which seems like the easier way to say it. Perhaps we should get into this part in a bit. But going back to the main part, it seems many believe that the main basis of this is that when accused of racism, the people of privilege then go ahead and claim they have also gone through racism and know what they mean and know what they feel. Instead of owning up to the racist act they have done, they take this act and try to defend themselves senselessly when others are probably aware that what they did was wrong and they need to own up to it regardless. And suppose that is where it's striked from, that you should not reverse the racism you have experienced onto others. However, it seems as though people have mixed up how they have wanted to say this message. People have instead decided that they would rather believe that no person of privilege can ever face racism. And it seems less calling out them for being falsely accused of it, and more them trying to say, if you are a person of privilege, shame on you for ever perhaps voicing your experiences of discrimination if it has ever happened to you. However, what many seem to leave out, or at least have flawed in their precipitation or perception of this, is they forget to mention that in the process of putting out these posts, they have made people think that only certain people, like certain races, can be discriminated against. They think that the people who are now above them are the evil ones, or the ones who will be racist towards them all the time, who are more likely to discern. They do not think, like, they are more likely to think, oh, only people like this do them. It's like they are more aiming towards attacking the people of different races. They basically, they make people believe that people of color have more say in everything, while the people of privilege are the evil ones that want them dead because the higher leader above them has the same skin color, so everyone is thinking that because of previous people of privilege supremacists, they believe that these supremacists, because of their shade or their color, that many people just trying to live their lives and defend people like this, or at least are trying to learn the proper way to understand their situation. They believe instead that these people are the same as these people because of their skin color, which at the same time seems like discrimination in itself. Now, if we were to oppose the situation and put it in reverse, let's say the person currently in power would be this one, would be the one less fortunate because of their history of race, of what people have decided apparently seems to have mattered back in the day. If they were to take that and instead believe that they were to take what they originally believed with these people less fortunate, that they were the ones in control, it would then paint the idea that, of course, perhaps this is the true evil one, but nowadays that isn't how it's working. However, what seems a bit upsetting is people are saying it is impossible to happen. However, this is limiting the idea that history can play out differently. If history had played out differently, we could have had a day and age where things were in reverse. However, people seem to close their minds to the idea and instead are believing that it can only be one. Now, there are many questions on why people may believe this. Are they aware of the fact that if a person of any race were to go against another and want all of their people dead and were to think they're all scums, if any person were to do that to another, you would think it is racism, no matter which race they are. And yet people say that only certain races can experience those who want them dead for it, because the people in their history have apparently defined their experiences and the other people who exist in the world. Then again, that seems more like cherry picking, in a sense where they are saying that they're saying no one can ever want to systematically be against them. No one has ever done this, and they're more likely to go against us because we, or at least people of privilege, have been known to apparently do this historically, where they hurt those of more so the less fortunate that are judged for their race. They take them and decide against them, and people say that this is wrong and needs to be stopped. However, a underlying problem has begun with this, and it is starting to seem to fall into the category of the similarity to sexism almost. Now, this may seem confusing, and it probably is, but to explain what the intention behind that statement means, it is more so to clarify historically, to add up to each other. To explain, back in the day, women had to fight for their rights. They were treated as inferior to men. And men were always historically in power. Men always had the upper hand. They were the strong ones. They were painted as the true thresholds and the leaders. And then, however, women began to fight for their rights, and it took a long time because since the days back then, people of gender, the ones like the ones that everyone considered inferior, which was women at the time, they would keep the women in kitchens. They would use them for their own purposeful practices. They would plot against them, and they would sort of keep them busy and limit them, and they would treat them less than human. And when women spoke out and eventually got their rights, they eventually began to close the gender gap, which put us to a more systematically justified system where nowadays people are not conditioned to think as much by gender. Yes, there will probably be rare cases where you will find kitchen jokes or people generally against each other because of their gender. You will see people who may still think that women should be their toys or whatever. But now that the gender gap has closed much more, we may also notice that some women treat men the same way, which then proves the theory that at times it is truly both, it is not by gender, but by moral and by the person's personality and repercussions of what they are known to do that have put them in the position to unjustifiably discriminate against the opposite and assume that they are the one that are more dominant or play a better role or are more important than the other by judging off of what holds no definition to what the person is actually like. If you look online, you can see r/nice boys and r/nice girls plays a part in showcasing how, in fact, almost exactly similar to a song made by Stromae called Tous les Mêmes, which is a French song depicting how we are all the same, no matter what side of the orientation we are on, and that it comes more from the heart, not by our features. And people have started to notice that men can be treated poorly too. Yes, probably less than women, and yes, more men are treated fairly and women are still maybe even fighting in some countries. Yes, we still have feminist movements, yes, but it is also noticeable that now that women have officially gotten up into the ranks, we are starting to notice that they can have equal treatment towards each other. It is less gender and now more towards the idea that it is by person and that both should be respected. Now, you may be wondering, how does this play into part with people of color? Well, let's see. One side is treated more powerfully, one side is treated more privileged, and the other had to fight for their rights or were treated like objects and not like human. They were treated inhumanely and unjustifiably, which was very wrong of society at the time. And noting this, if races ever became equal, which would be a successfully congratulatable process, if races ever got that far into play, perhaps we could begin to notice where we as people, and not by right people, fall into part of perhaps making the mistake of judging others by their skin color, not their qualities of personality. And again, this then again plays into part, how can we tell the difference between stereotypes, discrimination, racism, and other such things as supremacy. Supremacy, again, seems more like a form of racism, so that's off the table. But when it comes to things such as stereotypes and discrimination, it seems to have its own little spin-off. Now, let's say a person wanted to make categories, because right now it seems untouchable and messy, and everyone's fighting and panicking and trying to figure out how to help their brothers and sisters out with the situations we are in, with the people who are wrongly hurting others in our society. And we don't truly put social boundaries to what we are saying. What if we were to propose the idea that we could categorize and properly label what is what, so that we don't have confusion or mixed opportunity as to what we mean when we say certain things to people? Again, it would probably, well, for the first time stated, as it has not been stated before in this video, it would probably help others come to terms with what is socially acceptable when voicing things about this, or like how we see what we are doing, without panicking and fighting and lashing out on each other without a boundary or proper step or level into this proposition or place put into idea. Now, one could suggest that stereotypes are harmless jokes, not to take them genuinely unless you were to use them to discriminate and fully affect someone until it becomes systematic and is racist, and that discrimination is more declining someone's right of way to something, or at least assuming they are like this because of said quality of body rather than moral and personality, which again seems like racism. But knowing the backup of how reverse racism doesn't exist, to leave people of privilege in a dilemma of how to handle said thing or said view on thing, or how people are seeing this, one could say that racism is meant to be systematic, right? Where it is putting people to death, where it has made people treated people unfairly or inhumanely for years, and has put people in the place or ideal that they are bad because they look this way, when looks have nothing to do with what comes into play how. And those who pick those by how they look are cherry picking and ultimately only hurting themselves in the end when they are called out for it. And you would